Thank you for staying with us. Now, South Africa is starting an official inquiry to find out if past governments stopped efforts to bring apartheid-era criminals to justice. Now, this comes after families of victims said that even though the Truth and Reconciliation Committee named people who should be prosecuted, the government did not do anything. They did nothing. So some of those people never faced trial and have since died. Now, while the inquiry gives hope to some, others fear that it is too late and may not lead to real justice or compensation. So is this inquiry a true step towards justice, or it's just too little too late? Now, in the conversation today, I am joined by Zama Ntshona. He is the National Spokesperson, African Transformation Movement.
Good evening to you and the viewers.
All right, it's nice to have you with us.
Thank you so much.
All right, so now can you speak to us on why this inquiry, is only being launched now more than 30 years after apartheid? Do you see it as a genuine search for truth, or is it a way to address the lawsuit from 25 victims' families seeking damages?
Thank you so much. Well, for us as the African Transformation Movement, we must first state that the issue of justice on the matter of crimes committed against humanity by the previous regime are issues that must be sorted with immediate effect. But as much as that is the case, with the ANC under 40%, with the families seeking justice, it calls to question the actual motive of the ANC to actually institute an inquiry. You would remember that President Ramaphosa was the General Secretary of the ANC at a time when we took over power, or the Nationalist Party, or the Liberation Movement, let's just put it that way. The Liberation Movement took over power. So, and also he became the deputy president who was part of the very government that he says actually neglected its duties. So now when you come to him in his second term, suddenly waking up to a realization that there's a possibility that there have been interferences with the investigations of over 400 cases that were referred by the TRC, it actually brings a lot of questions. Is it a political move? Is it a way to maneuver around the claims of the families, or is it a question of genuine seeking for justice? And these questions are genuine questions, because truly it does not make sense that he was part of the 30 years and all of a sudden now he is now trying to find out if his very government and his party were not accomplices to the putting away of the many cases that should have been investigated and prosecuted.
Yeah, absolutely. That is the big question. Now, some survivors actually say that, just as you've said, successive governments actually failed to act on the Commission's recommendations and even denied victims and their families justice. Do you have any examples that actually suggest that high-level officials interfered with the prosecution? Because even the Truth and Reconciliation Commission said that they handed over several hundred cases to state prosecutors for action, but yet many were never pursued.
Well, you can only look at the end product. And the end product is telling us that there was no interest whatsoever to actually investigate. But why would there be no interest to investigate? Remember that the people of this country cried under the previous regime, died under the previous regime, went to exile because of the previous regime, wanted to fight. They were ready to die, picking up arms against the regime. Now, why, when you are at the pinnacle of power, would you then forsake the very essence of existence as a political party? And part of that was to find justice for the people of this country. Now, you can only delve into the space of interference because people who were that angry, it does not make sense that when they are in power, they are suddenly tame. It does not make sense that they are not interested in justice anymore. So for us as the African Transformation Movement, it is not a far-fetched idea that interference. There was no political interest and no political appetite to deal with this. Then the big question is that if you went to Lusaka because you wanted to overthrow the government, if you risked your life, left your family, you lost your loved ones, you mourned the death of your loved ones, why, when you are in power, wouldn't you want justice? And for us, the logical conclusion is that there was interference. There were agreements in the Sunset Clause that might have actually spoken to the execution of those who were guilty of the crimes that were committed against humanity.
Okay. Now, in addition to black activists, even survivors of white victims, have actually joined this fight. Does this cross-racial nature of these cases, change how South Africa should view its past? Do you think that the inquiry, treaty, or will treat all apartheid-era victims equally, regardless of race in this case?
It's going to be very interesting that from which premise were the white individuals affected with this. And also, it's going to be interesting for us as the African Transformation Movement to see what is the connection with what has just transpired with AfriForum and Solidarity going to the US President Trump. So it's going to be interesting is it a game of chess? If you make this move, I will make this one. I can also make these claims. Is it a chess game that they are playing right now, or is it a question of genuine redress and justice that they are looking for? Because these white, maybe one would say the black families might have not had the money to actually pursue justice, but some of these white families do. And why did they wait for 30 years? Why now, when there is this issue that is raised, that people now all of a sudden are realizing that we also want justice? So for us as the African Transformation Movement, what is going on right now needs to be looked into very carefully, because what we may be facing here is a scenario where it is a tit-for-tat scenario instead of individuals who are truly interested in justice.
All right. Now, speaking of those individuals interested in justice, the families are not just asking, why the cases were blocked. They are also demanding about 167 million rand in constitutional damages for the delay. But under the settlement, the government proposed only an inquiry, which has no authority to award such damages. Now, some people seem to think that this is actually robbing them of a legal victory, because why not let the courts decide their claims now instead of referring them to a commission that can only advise them?
Yeah, whenever the ANC, in fact, the ANC-led government faces some kind of predicament where decisions need to be made so that we are able to deal with the subject, they always defer the matter by using a particular commission and all of that. I feel truly that we had the TRC. The TRC made its recommendations. Right now, the courts must actually step in and actually deal with the matter. We do not know why, after 30 years, you are going to come now, and actually maybe it's going to be 29 years. Yes, if my memory serves me well, it was 1996 when we had the TRC. So after 29 years, you're going to come now, after 29 years of not investigating the cases, you want another commission. No, justice denied, delayed is justice denied. The courts of law must rule on this matter. The inaction of the ANC must also be seen as the ANC being an accomplice, an enabler, and the creator of a conducive environment to deny the people of this country the kind of justice that they deserve. So for us, as the African Transformation Movement, the issue of the commission is truly unwarranted. Let the courts do what they need to do, and also as part of their verdict, they must hold the government of this country accountable for actually not protecting the people of this country. What was Parliament doing when Parliament should have been playing an oversight role on the investigative directorates of this country when they are not moving? What were the politicians doing? They should have done something when they see that this a particular inquiry or investigation is not actually yielding anything. They've gone to numerous, we are in the 7th administration right now, and they still only, when there is a move to actually sue the state, they now see that all of a sudden they need to wake up. No. The courts of the land must decide on the matter and actually give to the victims what is due to them, and not leave out the ANC as an enabler of the victimization of the people of this country.
All right, now speaking of the ANC, you know, the party has actually governed continuously since 1994, right? Now, when families accuse the highest levels of government of interference, could today's ANC leaders be implicated? What will it mean for the party's credibility as well if past ANC administrations are found to have blocked justice?
When you look at the ANC and look at and you use a system of tracking, especially within the top 6, you will quickly see that the people who are there, they stay in the top 6 for the longest of time. You never find a scenario where it will rarely find individuals who are in the top 6 or 110. In most cases, you find them. If you look at the current president, Ramaphosa, in 92, if my memory serves me well, between 92 and 96, he was the SG of the movement, stayed in the NEC for the longest of time. And when you look at the second term of President Zuma, he was the deputy president of President Zuma and then became president. So in the given 31 years, he has been part of that leadership. So for us as the African Transformation Movement, when you speak about the ANC, you can't speak about it as if there are regimes which are different. It's just a question of who is the president. But when you look at the makeup and the body, you find that a significant number has, even when there are those because of old age or political reasons, who have fallen off. But there's a significant number that remains. So there's never a time when you could say this particular regime was totally annihilated and was never part of progression of the ANC. They're always there. So if you are going to try anyone on these matters, the ANC cannot be left out, because it is one party which should have policies, and those policies are the guiding policies of the movement, and therefore the non-implementation of those policies cannot be issues of just one individual or a certain regime. It must be the ANC itself that is liable for the non-functioning of state apparatus and the issue of not following resolutions that were taken by the very movement. It was the very movement that wanted justice. It was the very movement that wanted the restoration of human dignity. It was the same movement that wanted the abolishing of apartheid. It was the same movement that said they wanted to ensure that the people of this country live in an equal society where individuals are not looked at in terms of financial class, they are not looked at in terms of color, they are not looked at in terms of race and sex. And now at a time when everybody must be equal, they are now creating an enabling environment to protect others, because their functionality on the matter has created a conducive environment for those who were perpetrators of the crimes against humanity to actually walk away free instead of holding them accountable. So truly, the number one perpetrator and the individuals that must be held liable are both current and leaders that have been there of the ANC, because all of them at once, under the same policies, should be held liable.
Well, speaking of the current leaders, Zama, President Ramaphosa said that, you know, he is determined that the true facts be established, and, you know, has actually expressed empathy for the victims' anguish and frustration. Does that exonerate him? Do you think that his truth-seeking approach will actually restore public trust, or do you think that people might be looking for more concrete outcomes like prosecutions or even reparations? Hello, Zama, can you hear me?
I'm still audible that side.
Zama,
Oh, yes.
Did you hear my question?
Yes, I did hear your question. Not at all. Not when you've been part of the past 31 years. I mean, in fact, it's not even 31 years. Remember, President Ramaphosa is one of the architects of this democracy. President Ramaphosa was a negotiator in this democracy. For this democracy to be given birth to. President Ramaphosa is the drafter of the constitution of this country. President Ramaphosa has been one of the pillars of this democracy. So there will never be a time when you imagine the liberation or the transition phase coming to the new dispensation without President Ramaphosa. So he can't at any given point in the past 30 to 32 years say that there was a time when he was not involved, he was not influential. He could have, even when he was in business, he was still part of the NEC, he could have written a letter like he wrote a letter for concomitant action on the workers of Marikana. He could have written a letter on the issue of justice for the victims of apartheid. But because it was not in his interest, he did not do that. And unfortunately, sins of omission, whether deliberate or not, must be actually put on him. And unfortunately, as the former Secretary General, former president, and the two-time president of the movement who did nothing, he cannot be exonerated. He must be held equally liable for what he did not do, and that is to seek justice for the victims of apartheid.
Well, but the lawyers have actually warned that due to delays, that evidence and witnesses have been lost, and this makes the prosecution nearly impossible in most of the cases. So how do you expect the inquiry to have any chance of leading to an actual criminal, accountability or even an investigation?
People must be held liable for non-action, because till we get to a point where we have had 30 years of people passing on, 30 years of evidence being of losing evidence, 30 years of losing evidence, and even individuals forgetting what actually transpired 30 years ago, people must be held liable. And who best than the very enabler of such a phenomenon, which is the ruling party? So for us as the African Transformation Movement, yes, we might have lost evidence at this stage. Yes, we might have lost witnesses, key witnesses who may be dead at this stage, but we think that it is imperative that we hold those who actually created this environment for loss of evidence, losing witnesses. And those must be the ones who actually get on the stand and actually accept liability for what they've actually driven this country to. But it is important, as much as I say that it is important for us to uncover the truth, and I believe that the courts of law, not the inquiry, would actually be able to do that. The inquiry is just going to cost us a lot of money, and they would also give us a whole lot of nothing, especially without the necessary witnesses and evidence.
So just before you go, if the truth is uncovered, if the commission uncovers evidence of obstruction, what happens next? And also for the families, looking at it from their own perspectives, decades of waiting have actually taken a personal toll. How can a legal inquiry meaningfully address the emotional pain of the people who have waited 40 years for closure? What do the victims need to feel, feel this effort wasn't in vain?
We can look at it in two ways. As the families, I would say, neglect the inquiry, just go to court and seek the relief that you want. And then the other one, you can look at it from a perspective of holding government accountable, but we already know which government should be held accountable for that, and that it will be the government of the ANC. Maybe the only thing that we can learn from the process is how to actually cushion state institutions, especially Chapter 9 institutions, from influence, because unfortunately what this will also uncover it is the capture of state apparatus. One of those things, you would remember that the leaders of the Chapter 9 institutions are actually anointed, appointed, and appointed by the president. So there's always been that unholy relationship between those leaders and the president, as they are at the mercies of the president. Maybe the only thing that would uncover was that is maybe to remove some of these powers from the president and actually give Parliament the power to nominate. And then in that case, you have an opportunity to influence in a manner that is not going to depend on one man, and therefore it would have to be Parliament again that fires those individuals, unlike in this particular scenario where you have the president being the sole appointer of such individuals. Parliament only recommends, and then the president. So I think that's the only way we can salvage anything out of this. But apart from that, the families must actually just reject the inquiry and go to court.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time and for your experts' opinions, Zama Ntshona, National Spokesperson, African Transformation Movement in East London, UK.
Thank you so much.